Hey everybody, AJ here, and welcome back to the Eagle Ray channel. This is the much more informal version of the Eagle Ray channel. If you've seen the latest videos, then you know that about a 10-minute video comes out every Wednesday or so. These days they've been a little bit longer, so that I've been releasing them Thursday or Friday each week. But every Sunday we come on live to talk about electric marine news. We talk about the latest release that came out earlier this week, and then we take some questions from the chat and do a giveaway if possible. The current giveaway that we have running is the Milwaukee angle grinder. This is going to be given away as soon as we have 100 people in chat, and it's early days, as you know if you've been here before on the channel, but if you hit the like button, that's the biggest thing that you can do to help get this out to a bunch of people live so that we can get enough people eventually to do the giveaway. It may not happen today, but if we can get 100 people in the chat today, then this will be given away. But we're back every week, so it's only going to be a matter of time before we can do that giveaway, and then there will be other giveaways that follow it. But let's jump into the latest electric marine news. I'm often talking about either trolling motors, electric outboards, or batteries. We'll cover other topics in the future, but for right now, there's just so much to talk about on those three topics that I want to focus there, especially since this past week I came across the first listings I've seen for a different type of chemistry than anything we've had available before 2023. And so I want to start by just covering kind of the state of the industry, pricing wise, for what's available in the current lineup of marine batteries that we have available at the best price for the best feature set. And that is, if you've watched the channel at all, you know that lithium iron phosphate is the best battery to go with all around for all of its specs and all of its safety features combined. Lithium in general kind of just blows the competition out of the water compared to old lead acid batteries. But there are different types of lithium, and they're not all created equal. We've talked about lots of that in the past. But it's pretty obvious these days that lithium iron phosphate kind of stole the entire market from every other type of lithium. I don't know what the market share is in the marine industry specifically, but it's very quickly growing to encompass a vast majority market share of basically any market that purchases batteries. We saw last week how it's growing to become close to $500 billion import bill for the U.S. straight out of China every year. And one of the things we use that for is to power our trolling motors on our boats. And so I just wanted to look at the pricing really quickly of what you get for the holidays in 2023. If you're looking to power a trolling motor on your boat, or really any accessories at the same time, you're going to pay somewhere in the realm of, normally it was around $200 to $250 per kilowatt hour. And those prices are coming down, because if you look at the cost to manufacture for the OEMs, most of these OEMs are in China, but we do have factories tooling up in the States. The theoretical limit that scientists have tried to figure out is around $75 per kilowatt hour. And when we get to that mark, we're probably not going to be able to make lithium iron phosphate batteries any cheaper, because that's just the physics of the situation with that chemistry. And they are pretty close to that already, if I understand, at some of the OEMs in China. And so the prices coming down from here are likely going to come more from the issues with the supply chain, because right now the supply chain is just incredibly bloated with lots of middlemen, and that will shake out over time, I think, and that's where most of the price drops will come in lithium iron phosphate from here, whereas in past years it was coming from the fact that they were tooling up the factories to be able to make more of them with less cost to their bottom line. So interesting. I'm getting some notifications. Let me fix that really quickly. And so the pricing is still going to come down, I think, although not as aggressively as we've seen in the past decade. But the prices are already pretty darn good, in my opinion. So if you look for the holidays at some of these prices, this is a 100 amp hour pack, which is the common size you'd buy for a trolling motor. And a lot of them are coming in close to $200 right now. And that's, I said $75 was the manufacturer's cost. And so the margins they add on top of that that as they sell to a reseller who sells to another reseller who sells to us, however many middlemen there are, that cost ends up, and along with packaging too, you got to put it in a plastic box, you got to connect a BMS to it. All of those things add up to around 200 and 250 has been the price throughout the second half of this year. But as we approach the holidays, a lot of people are trying to do blowout deals to get rid of their current inventory. And this year in particular has been quite a hit to the EV industry. We had a huge boom in the car market after COVID, and that has kind of resulted in a following crash a little bit across the entire vehicle market, and that definitely includes EVs. So the EV market was expecting to do really amazing numbers this year, and the numbers have come out to be fractions of what they were expecting. So there's a lot of extra supply, I expect, of lithium iron phosphate batteries that just didn't get used this year to put in more and more EVs. And I think that has a lot to do with why these batteries are coming down so much in price right now. They're just trying to get rid of them so that they can make room for next year's supply. So I don't think that these numbers are permanently what we're going to see from here on out, but the numbers are pretty amazing. Like it's very common to see a 100 amp hour pack below 250 bucks. And the best price that I found from looking earlier today on Amazon is this $190 pack from a company I've never heard of. And you have to be very careful with these, by the way, because especially if you click into one of these and it has absolutely zero reviews, you want to be very careful. I personally wouldn't buy this one. If you want to take a chance on it, sometimes I've had some good luck in the bargain bin on Amazon. But I don't know if I would buy this one in particular with no reviews. But the price is amazing. Like some of these here will list at under $200, but you'll find there's a trick a lot of them pull. Somebody pointed this out to me in the forums as I was discussing this. If you're over a certain price mark on Amazon, even if you have Prime, the seller has the option to put a fairly sizable shipping cost on top of that. And so this one from Lisa Telly, for example, is it looks like one of the best prices on here at 180 bucks. But then they add a $40 shipping charge, which is not very common on Amazon. So that's how they make it look like they're way better than everything around them at over 200. But this one at the top from LFP EST, who I've never heard of, is selling at 190 with free delivery. So that is, I think, the best kilowatt hour price that I've seen on Amazon ever. If you do the math on that, because these are slightly more than a kilowatt hour, they're 1.28 kilowatt hours. And so it's 28% larger than the apples to apples price you would want to use to compare to other batteries. And so I did the math on this and it comes out to about $148 per kilowatt hour. And that's compared to what the manufacturer pays to make the batteries. It's about twice the manufacturer's cost. And that's pretty crazy when you consider that there are probably at least 3 middlemen selling before this product gets to you on Amazon. They're all working with razor thin margins when they're selling that low a price. So don't expect that to last forever. But I think once all of these middlemen are shaken out of the industry, for the most part, we will see lithium iron phosphate batteries for sale regularly around this price, the 150 per kilowatt hour mark. I wouldn't expect them to drop much more than that because, like we saw, the physics of the chemistry is going to prevent the prices from going down much more than that. Once you account for building the pack in the first place, shipping it across the ocean, then it's going to cost something like 150 to 200 bucks for a battery this size. But that's a good reason for us to start looking at other chemistries. And there's a lot of talk about half a dozen other chemistries besides lithium iron phosphate in particular, that might be the winner that eventually kills lithium iron phosphate. And we just don't know what it is until it finally arrives in force. But the one that seems to be showing the most promise these days is one that I covered like 6 months ago. I think in April, we talked about how BYD, a car company in China, basically the Tesla of China, was releasing a new model called the Seagull. And there were a whole bunch of articles that came out that said some of these Seagull models are going to be released with a sodium ion battery pack. And I don't think any car has gone to production with a sodium-ion battery pack before, because there's no factory, even in China, that is tooled up and ready to put out those kind of batteries at scale. There was a startup that built a prototype with that model, and that's what it was. I read those articles, and it was clear these are not ready for production yet. It's just the media likes to grab onto these things so that they can make a headline. But since then, throughout this year, there have been some experimental sodium-ion batteries coming out for sale, because when we did that live stream 6 months ago, I looked on AliExpress during that stream and typed in sodium-ion battery, and there was literally nothing available. But in the June and July that followed that, I'm just going to skip ahead here to an article I found about BYD, which is the company that launched that car. They now have a deal with this company called Waihai, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Holding Group, which is tooling up a factory to mass produce sodium-ion batteries. And they're not the only ones, because CATL, one of the biggest OEMs in China as well, is in July, they announced a factory that's doing exactly the same thing. So China is just starting to get into gear on sodium-ion batteries, and I tried to look for anything in the States that is on a similar footing. And the closest thing I could find was this joint partnership between researchers at Caltech and UCLA and Stanford, and I think a couple other colleges in California, who are beginning research. And it felt a little bit like we were already behind the curve on lithium iron phosphate. We're going to be behind the curve again on sodium ion if we don't do something about it pretty quickly. So it's great that we're building lithium iron phosphate factories all over the country now, but we are just kind of following in China's footsteps. They proved the technology. They're already at massive scale with it. We're running to catch up to that. We probably should look where the puck is going to and start tooling up factories for sodium ion, but we just don't have the expertise in research to know what chemistries, know what metal mixtures to put into these batteries yet. All of that expertise is over in China right now, I think. So I think we could really use some research dollars going into some of these projects at universities. And I do believe the Department of Energy has invested in that multi-college project in California. So hopefully something comes pretty quickly from that, because these sodium-ion batteries look pretty promising. If you look at the specs on them, typically what you'll see is they're not as powerful volume-wise as lithium is, but they're much more powerful weight-wise. So they call it volumetric versus gravimetric energy density, where sodium as a substance is extremely lightweight. But you need quite a bit of it in order to make a battery that matches the power output of your typical lithium iron phosphate. And so these are going to be pretty big packs, but they're also going to last a lot longer. The coolest part about them, well, there's two cool things about them that we don't get from lithium right now. Number one is they last forever. So they're theorizing something like 50,000 cycles, whereas the best lithium iron phosphates can do something like 10,000 to 15,000 cycles in best case scenarios. So sodium batteries look like they may last 5 times as long as lithium, but also they're going to have much higher momentary output capability than lithium iron phosphate does. There are some types of lithium that have incredible output capability, but those are extremely volatile, as we've seen in many media articles. They catch fire and they create infernos pretty easily. The powerful ones do. And so typically these days we're moving down the chain to weaker and weaker lithium types like lithium iron phosphate, because we want them to be safe at the same time as they're powerful enough. But these sodium batteries are, the thing with them is they have a much higher temperature that they need to reach in order to hit a thermal runaway moment. Which means they're not going to catch fire and create a massive amount of destruction until you get them something like 5 times as hot as lithium batteries. And so you can run them just as hard as lithium or harder, and there's practically no danger of creating a fire. And that's one of the biggest reasons we're going to want to use them in cars. Even though they take up a lot more space, we're going to try and find a balance there where, especially with larger vehicles, we'll probably start using sodium batteries, but even more so in energy storage for the grid. Where we have peaker plants that need batteries in order to supplement the load that's on the grid at a given time. Those are all moving in a lithium iron phosphate direction right now, but eventually we will probably replace a lot of those lithium iron phosphate batteries with sodium batteries as they become cost effective, which is, to be fair, it's going to take several years. The first factories in China are just now tooling up. Not even a whisper of factories tooling up in the States yet. So this is more of like a 2030 story. But the interesting thing, though, is that the very first sodium batteries, unlike what we saw earlier this year, are now available for sale. I found some on AliExpress, although I don't know that I trust these listings at all, because a lot of them, even though it says sodium ion, sodium ion, sodium ion, all of these say sodium ion, they look very similar, and the sizes are very similar to the typical form factors of lithium cells that you would see. These blue cases, for example, look exactly like prismatic lithium iron phosphate cells. These 18650s look identical to NMC 18650s. So I imagine in some cases, if you try and buy some of these directly from China, you're just going to get lithium cells and they put a different label on them. And you can verify that pretty easily because, as I understand, the voltages on sodium ion are much different than lithium. So if you know how to test for that, then you can verify whether you got junk cells the moment they arrive. But by that time, it's already too late. They came from China. What are you going to do? Return them? You do have consumer protection on AliExpress. So you can buy a few of these and just to test the water with them. And even if somebody sells you some junk cells, you can get your money back. But you're probably not going to build a large battery pack for anything with sodium cells because of that this early on, until we see a lot more people doing experiments with these and identifying the reputable sources from China. In the meantime, there's only one source that I could find that I personally trust, and it's a site called jag35.com. You may, if you're familiar with battery YouTubers, you've probably seen this site before. It's run by a guy named Jehu Garcia, who has a great YouTube channel. He's been doing YouTube videos about batteries for many, many years. He just posted this a couple of days ago, I think, and it got me excited about maybe purchasing some sodium batteries for the first time, because I hadn't really seen that anywhere available for sale. But the thing about these is these are almost certainly recycled. I don't think it says in his current spec sheet whether he got these new or used. But because these are basically brand new, and it says somewhere here that he has a video review coming out soon about them, I imagine he is in the process of testing the specs on these right now. So what we see on this page is probably just what the seller gave to him. And he, I think, usually buys with he buys from recyclers who have received the batteries in bulk from some EV manufacturer who wasn't able to complete a project with them, so they just had to get rid of them as fast as possible. So they flip them to the recycling market, who sometimes sends them back to China. But if they can get guys like Jehu to sell some of them to his audience, then they'll sell some into a second life situation where people can put them in an EV or put them in off-grid storage solution or something like that. The interesting thing about these is, if these specs are to be believed, they're pretty friggin' incredible, because this battery is only 5.6 amp hours, a very small battery. It's a 20th the size of the lithiums we were just looking at, but it can do 25C. And typical lithium iron phosphates can only do 1C. So this thing is claiming to be able to put out 25 times as many momentary amps as a lithium iron phosphate cell can. Which means at this size, you can do 140 amps on this tiny little pack. Now, if you pull that many amps, this battery is going to go dead very quickly, of course, but maybe that's all you need for your application, right? If you're For example, if you're driving a little RC car or an RC plane or a drone, people use high C rate tiny batteries in those applications all the time because they don't mind flying around for just 10 minutes as long as it's got enough power to keep them in the air with a nice speed. And so they optimize in the direction of momentary power instead of capacity. And that usually with the lithium markets would lead people in the direction of lipos, which I would never recommend anybody put on a boat, especially not a boat that they're going to be standing on. Some people do that, but that's usually in the racing category. And people who build race boats are pretty crazy and foolhardy, in my opinion, anyway. It's fine for them to get on a boat full of lipos because maybe they're okay with the 5% possibility that this thing could explode in an inferno while I'm on it. That's what lifeboats can do. And that's why if you want super high momentary output, you've always had to take the risk that you're going to be in the middle of a massive fire with lithium batteries. But with sodium batteries, if these specs are to be believed, you can get those extremely high momentary output rates without that danger of fire because, as we know, sodium 5 times less likely to cause a fire. Not that it can't cause a fire. I'm sure that if you push these batteries hard enough, just like anything else, you could catch them on fire eventually, but apparently they're 5 times as difficult to catch on fire as a LiFePO cell, and LiFePO cells are really hard to catch on fire. So these look really cool. I am actually thinking about buying a few of these so I can test them with some trolling motors, and we'll see how well they work. But at 5.6 amp hours, I think I'm going to need to buy at least a few of them and string them in parallel to make it worth my while, because otherwise it would just last 10 minutes or so on the water with a regular trolling motor. I need to start moving into bigger and bigger motors because any given trolling motor is not going to push this kind of pack anywhere near its limits. Most of the trolling motors I've used so far have pulled less than 50 amps, and this thing can do almost triple that. So I'm going to have to bring a motor in here that can really put a battery like this to its paces eventually. So we'll see how that goes, and that'll be fun. But I want to see if there are any questions in the chat. If you want to leave me any questions for the end, I'll get to them at the end. But I appreciate you showing up and showing support, and we're going to jump into the latest Eagle Ray video. I'm just going to jump through a few quick spots that I want to highlight because this week was all about running dual motors simultaneously. Last week's video showed how I'm working on this project where I can control 2 trolling motors wirelessly. And the thing holding me back from bringing that out on the lake was the fact that I didn't want to have to lift each one of them out of the water manually. And so this week I bought a couple of actuators and I attached them to each motor so that I could just hit a button and lift both of them at the same time. And that was a fun project. It ran into all kinds of hurdles that I didn't expect. The biggest one was the fact that it's very difficult to attach an actuator to a trolling motor shaft without getting the actuator wet. And so to do that, I had to do some more significant metalworking than I've ever done in the past. And so a lot of this video is about the new equipment that I had to purchase and set up in order to make this happen. So let's take a quick glance through that video.
In this video, we're going to stow and deploy 2 trolling motors
automatically at the push of a button. In this video, we're going to stow and deploy 2 trolling motors automatically at the push of a button. Hey everybody, AJ here, and welcome back to the Eagle Ray channel where we do all things DIY electric boats. Marine motors, batteries, solar panels, you name it. If it's got volts and it's on a boat, you are in the right place. Today, we have got a grab bag of tasks that is going to culminate in one big goal. We need to stow and deploy dual trolling motors automatically. I revealed this dual thruster project last week and it's not quite send ready yet because I don't want to lift and deploy these motors manually while I'm out on the water. So I bought a couple linear actuators to automate this process. These are made by Vevor. They're kind of like the Harbor Freight of China. And I know what you're probably thinking. Harbor Freight is kind of the Harbor Freight of China because they fill their store with nothing but cheap Chinese imports. But Vivor is just like that, except they don't have a storefront. So they're kind of like an online version of Harbor Freight. They got a bunch of junk in their store, but here and there you can find a diamond in the rough. And these, I don't know if I'd classify as a diamond in the rough. They work. They were a little bit flawed when they showed up. So one of them makes a really loud clicking sound as it's almost fully retracted, which is kind of annoying. And then one of them is slightly slower than the other one, even though they're both the exact same item number. So that's a little frustrating since I'm going to try and keep them in sync, but I think we can make it work. So these are 20-inch stroke length, which is exactly the size that I needed to move 30-pound thrust trolling motors, and these move like a snail, less than half an inch per second. Take a quick look at how fast they move. If you want to upgrade to faster speed and higher quality, you could get this progressive automation actuator for more than 3 times the price. Personally, I am going to stick with the slow, cheap one. Thank you very much. We saw the dual motors running briefly in last week's video, but this week we'll actually install the lifts so we can deploy those motors on the lake for the first time. But see, here is the problem. This is where the actuator mounts, and it attaches to the trolling motor up here, but the trolling motor is all the way down here when it's fully deployed.
A lot of YouTubers have tried to solve this puzzle by
Okay, so you
flipping the
can...
actuator upside down and attaching the neck bolt to the little flange at the top of the bullet. But I really don't want to go down that.
Okay, so you can skip, I'm going to skip through to the end of this video because you can watch the whole thing to see all of the details, but the short and sweet of it is I had to set up a CNC plasma table in order to create the brackets that could properly connect the actuators to the trolling motors. And so I'm just going to jump ahead to the part where I finally get that working because it was quite a rigorous task to make it happen. So let's just jump ahead to that. And that's what it was trying to do. So what we have to do, I think, is press that button where it says run from line. Let's see if that works. Okay, so it generated a new program from that, and then we can hit start. Lesson learned, same thing again. The other side of the plate still didn't have enough margin on the edge, so we lost the plasma again. We're almost there. One more cut to finish this bracket. Let's try it. Looks pretty good. We're gonna get it out from under the cutter and see what the final results are. Hey, it's separated. That's a good sign. You can see there's a lot of dross on the other side. I need to play with the settings to see if I can get rid of some of that, but we can just grind that off pretty quickly anyway. So there's some cleanup work to do on this. Let's get that going. I'm calling it good enough. It's horseshoe and hand grenade time. Let's get out on the water and test this contraption on the lake and see if it works. So the very first run of this motor is not going well, guys. Watch this. Pushing it very lightly. That beam is not very secure. The actuator is not very secure. Same thing on the other side, but it's even worse on the other side because the other side is running a different spec motor. I actually have a Minn Kota Enduro over here, and I have a Motor Guide R3 over here, and they're supposed to be both rated for 30-pound thrust, but one of them is obviously much more powerful than the other because I'm going in circles right now. The Minn Kota is winning by a long shot, and I'm only giving it quarter throttle approximately. If I give it full throttle, I'm afraid I might damage these brackets. See, I didn't spend very long making these. I'm going to spend a lot more time building that up in future videos. But this is a fun first test. It's good to know that it moves at all, but obviously not going to be able to steer very well with this, so I'm not going to get far from the dock. I've got to row back if I want to go straight. Well, all right, so that is the conclusion of this week's video. I'm going to pick up where we left off there in the video that's coming out in a few days. I've got a lot I need to get done. I'm working on brand new brackets to make the bars that are holding those trolling motors stronger. On top of that, I've got to go pick up a second Endura because I want the same spec on each side of the boat to make sure that that's not the problem with keeping the steering steady. Also, the differential thrust I have between the two motors, I'm not sure that that's quite reliable because I'm using a pretty cheap RC remote to do that, and so I might need to manually program that a little bit in order to get that fully working. That will probably come in a later video, but the main thing that I want to show off in this upcoming video is the wiring for the switch that I used to make the actuators move up and down, because I've seen a lot of people use actuators to move a trolling motor. I've never seen anybody do it for two at the same time. Similar idea whether you use one or two, but the wiring for a DPDT switch is a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with it. So I'm going to make part of this upcoming video about that. That'll hopefully help anybody who wants to use an actuator on their trolling motor in the future. If we have any questions in the chat, it is time to speak now or forever hold your peace. Also, smash that like button to see if we can get anybody else in the chat. If we can get the count up to 100 people, then we will be able to give away this Milwaukee angle grinder. It is early days, so as you can see, there's not very many people in the chat yet, but if you hit that like button enough times, we might get closer to the number, and then next week YouTube will prioritize us a little bit more, and we just need to scale it a little bit 1 week at a time until a few weeks from now we'll be able to do the giveaway as soon as we have 100 people in here. I'm hoping to give this away before Christmas, by the way. I think a lot of the kind of people who watch the Eagle Ray channel probably already have plenty of power tools, but this, in my opinion, is a great gift for like a 16-year-old nephew who's never touched a power tool before. So many young kids these days don't have any experience whatsoever working with power tools, doing anything with their hands except playing video games. And this is a great way to convince them, hey, you can go do some custom work on a John boat and actually see that work help you catch a fish on the water within the next week after Christmas if you get one of these in your stocking for Christmas. So I'm hoping to get this out to somebody before Christmas so that even if you personally don't want it, you can gift it to a family member, anybody you think might be interested in getting into the DIY lifestyle. Because anybody who works on boats in this community probably knows an angle grinder is a must-have if you're working on an aluminum John boat. It's one of the very first tools you should buy, and the Milwaukee is a great tool to have. The batteries are extremely expensive, but when I give that tool away, I am including one of my 5 amp hour batteries, and those are pretty expensive. So I think the whole gift in its entirety is like a $200 value. So hopefully we can get enough people in chat to give that away pretty soon. But it looks like it's probably not going to happen this week. If you have any questions about the video, the wiring of that switch, any previous videos, any questions you want to ask, we're going to wrap up pretty soon. We've got a message from Lake Ratatouille, always good to have new power tools. There you go. Among the power tools you want to buy, the very first ones you got to have, you need a power drill. And you need an angle grinder. I don't have discs to include with this one as a gift. And so if you do end up winning that and gifting it to a family member, you probably want to go to Home Depot and grab at least a cutoff wheel or a flap disc. Those are the two must-haves that'll really help you work on an aluminum John boat. Yeah, we're closing in on wrapping up for today. Unless you guys have any questions, lots of good information about sodium batteries. I'm excited to get some sodium batteries in here for the first time. They're finally available for sale. I don't think I mentioned earlier, but they're essentially twice as expensive as lithium iron phosphate batteries, even though this one that we saw from Jag35 is probably used or refurbished. It's very unclear whether or not it's used, but it's definitely sold into the recycling market for a second life use. So who knows what kind of quality it is. And Jehu, who sells these, is always very responsible about specifying whether or not these are of known quality. And he prices them accordingly. So even this price of $20 for one of these is, it's probably a lot lower than what these will retail for when they start coming out to the mass market. And even then, they're at this low price, they're twice as expensive as lithium iron phosphate. So I think it's going to be a few years before we have bulk sales available of sodium batteries. I'm thinking like 2026, 2027, we're going to really start to see those show up and compete at massive scale with the current best lithium batteries. So until then, it's going to be all about lithium iron phosphate. Mostly on the Eagle Ray channel, you'll see me testing lithium iron phosphate batteries, but I'm going to play around with others here and there. Yeah, there you go, Lake Ratatouille. The price on this battery from Jag35 is really great for the fact that you can get apparently over 100 amps out of a battery that small. I'll pay $20 for that all day, even though capacity-wise, you'll pay about $10 for a lithium iron phosphate of that size. As long as you're getting, a good deal off of Amazon. There are, by the way, and I've harped on many battery companies before for ridiculous pricing of lithiums, and you can see it just plain as day. If I scroll through here, I'm not going to call out any brand names in particular, but you'll see as soon as, and don't get fooled by the fact that these are multi-quantity. The price goes up if you buy a bunch of them, of course. But there's a certain brand here, I'm just going to scroll past in particular, I think it's on page 2, that really jumps out. All of these, by the way, are 100 amp hour. They're all exactly the same capacity, and yet, whoops, there's one in there that's somehow $800. How did that happen? Not calling out any names, but some of these battery manufacturers are still charging 4 times as much as everybody else. So you do have to be careful, but most of the time, as long as you just go into Amazon and type in 12 volt, 100 amp hour LifePo 4, you're going to find a whole bunch of great prices this holiday season. And in my experience, the budget brands, even though they typically offer 0 warranty, whereas with the ones that charge an arm and a leg, you probably get a really good warranty. Personally, I don't care about the warranty. That I'm probably never going to use it. LifePo cells are so tried and true that they're very unlikely to fail on you. The thing that will fail is the BMS. And I think I'm going to do videos in the future about how to replace a BMS because it is kind of a pain with most of these batteries coming sealed. You have to destroy the case in order to get inside and replace the BMS. But the thing is, if they just made that a little bit easier, they would not have to charge you an arm and a leg to replace the whole battery, because the BMS costs like $20 to get a BMS that can do 100 amps. So you would be able to, if you could just open screws on the top of the lid, pull that old BMS out of there, drop in a replacement for $20, then you could repair your lithium batteries forever. They would last 30 years maybe. And so I think some of these companies want you to just buy another whole battery when that happens, rather than cracking the case open. So I think I'm going to do a video in the future where I actually saw a case open, not just to show you what's inside, because there's lots of YouTubers who do battery teardowns where they just rip it open to show you what's inside. That's fine, but my channel is not a battery teardown channel. What I want to do is show you guys how, if a battery fails on you, how you can fix it extremely easily. All you got to do in most cases is replace that BMS. The problem is, how then do you seal the case up after that? You probably have to find a new case to put it in after that, which is kind of annoying. But it's what you have to do if the case is sealed. However, there are a couple of battery manufacturers who are coming out who have cases that are serviceable. In other words, they're screw tops with proper gasket seals. I think I'm going to bring one of those batteries in to test it as well, because I really like the idea of serviceability. Lake Ratatouille says, I'm worried about thermal runaway for lithium. Do sodium have issues? Great question. Lithium runaway has always been a thing, always will be a thing. The reason lithium iron phosphate in marine is the one that has just completely taken over is because the thermal runaway is something like 80% better, like with NMC cells and NCA and especially with lipos. The thermal runaway is pretty easy to trigger. And the moment you poke a hole in a lipo cell, for example, it'll just go up in flames immediately the moment some oxygen touches those inner contents. Whereas with LifePo, I've seen people drive a stake straight through all of the cells and nothing happens except some smoke. And it is a lot of smoke and you shouldn't breathe that smoke, but it's usually not going to cause an inferno the way other types of lithium do. So thermal runaway has a wide range of dangers, right? But when we get to sodium, one of the hopes is that because in these labs where they're testing them right now, they're showing that the temperature at which you reach thermal runaway is something like 5 times as high as even LifePo. The theory is that could mean these batteries never thermally run away, no matter what you do to them, which would be amazing. Like, especially if you can push 25C through one of these small a pack this big, and you're running it at over 100 amps, and it doesn't blow up ever. That's pretty amazing. That's when I would get a 25C battery onto a boat and not have any qualms about it. I'm never going to put a lipo on a small boat. I've got the Yaktoon right outside. I've played with plenty of lipo batteries in the past. I would never put a lipo battery on that boat because I know that if there's only like a 0.5% chance that one would just randomly fail on me because I know how to take care of them. But even in that very small outside chance that a lipo fails while it's on the boat with me, the whole boat's going up in flames, and I don't want to be there when that happens. So thermal runaway is a huge concern with certain types of lithium. We'll see when we get our hands on these sodium cells if that is a complete concern of the past. I have a feeling that when we start getting a hold of enough of these sodium cells, from what I understand is there's a range of different types of sodium cells, just like a range of lithium cells, based on the metal recipes that they pair with them. So just like with lithium, if you put a lot of nickel in versus a lot of iron in, you can make the sodium cell more powerful, just like you can make the lithium battery more powerful. So I imagine the ways that they find to mix up the recipe such that the energy density is at its maximum, those cells will be more powerful. They will run away thermally faster than the safer ones, just like the stuff that we see with lithium. But the big question is the most dangerous sodium will sit somewhere relative to the safest lithium. So is the safest lithium more dangerous than the most dangerous sodium? If so, then sodium is going to be an excellent candidate to use in marine applications, because we'll get this best of both worlds where they're plenty safe compared to what we've been doing for years, and they put out way more power than anything that we've had before. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. I'm very excited about it. So I think I'm going to wrap up. I appreciate you taking some time to comment, like Ratatouille, and tell your friends about the weekly live stream. It's on Sunday, every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to be out of town in 2 weeks, so I'm not sure yet if I'm going to be able to make a live stream in 2 weeks, but I'm definitely back next week, same time. So let everybody know who you think might be interested in winning a power tool. That I'm going to try and do a giveaway as soon as we show up in the live stream next week. I'm going to ask everybody to smash that like button so that hopefully we can get closer to 100 people in chat. And before too long, hopefully before Christmas, we'll be able to do that first giveaway. We'll have more giveaways coming up right behind it. I'm going to give away trolling motors, batteries, all kinds of cool stuff on this channel. And all of that's going to be coming up pretty soon. So I'm going to wrap up. I appreciate everybody showing up. I am going to get back on the water this week. I'm going to, while I'm doing the video to show you guys how I wired those actuators, I'm also going to be getting that second Minn Kota motor to try and get the wireless system working properly. I'm going to have plenty of footage of that in the upcoming video. Yeah, so the water is incredible right now here in the Southwest. A lot of people I think are winterizing already, but you know how the winters are getting colder later and later every year these days. I'm hoping a lot of you guys around the country have at least one or two more sends available before you have to winterize, because it's just so much fun. The only thing I have to fight here is the wind. There's a really high wind today, but just a few days ago it was just glass across the whole lake. It was incredible. So I'm hoping to get more days like that this week. And I hope the same for you guys. I'm going to let you guys go, but I'm back same time next week. And until then, I hope you guys all have a good one. Take care.